This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
I'm Dalia Asterbadi. I'm with Verve.AI, and you're listening to Popping the Bubble.
Hey, Dalia. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's really exciting to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you.
Where the heck are we?
We are at the Artificial Intelligence Conference. What's it called? AI World. Yes.
AI World here in San Francisco. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, very, very cool. And Dalia is a speaker here and traveled all the way from Toronto. She's the CEO and founder of Verve.AI.
Wow.
Pretty interesting background to begin with. You are a data scientist and engineer. Just love to hear a little bit about your story. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, earlier we were talking about when did I really get into tech, and I think I showed that picture of me sitting in front of the IBM mainframe.
So cute.
Yeah, I mean, me and my two sisters have been in tech, and no, we've been usually synonymized with the Kardashians of tech, and and we haven't used that card just yet. Really been fascinated with computer systems, but most importantly, taking information in an absolute world and trying to bring it into a statistical place, which is really what got us to Verve. You know, how can we become a little bit smarter, be more intelligent, rather than be victims to the machine?
Right. And your father was an engineer, so that's how you got your passion for technology.
Yes.
From your family, actually, right?
Yeah, both my parents were tech entrepreneurs, and my father started his career actually at IBM.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you also have a very diverse international background. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been around. Grew up in many places. Of course, you could see when IBM was growing, we sort of followed along. It's home now is Toronto, Canada, but I've been studied in California and Toronto, and really been just trying to expand my research. We started out with building a lab with Ryerson University in Toronto, and from there it's just been building out real functional use cases. So I can't say I love San Francisco and I love Toronto, and it's always been a battle figuring out how to make the best.
I love Toronto. The only thing about Toronto is it's already dark and tomorrow morning there. It's so far north, you know.
Exactly.
It is. But it's an international city. All the faces are every color there. Like, it is so diverse.
It's so diverse.
It is a beautiful
and
place.
it's there was an article just recently around, Liberty is moving north just from a tech innovation. I think, machine learning and AI, it's definitely getting us all recognized being in Toronto. So we're proud of being part of that.
So Toronto is like a little hub of AI companies and machine learning data scientists.
Yeah, I love it when I get a call from a VC in Sand Hill Road saying, hey, you're from, the place where machine learning is being innovated. And it's kind of cool when you see that. Before, I remember having to sort of explain where Toronto is.
Right.
And I remember the funniest moment was we were at Dreamforce, and I don't know if you ever remember our mayor, let him rest in peace, Rob Ford, who got him.
Yes, we've heard quite a lot about Rob Ford.
That was the turning point where people were like, we know Toronto. And I think since
he put Toronto on the map.
There you go. Sometimes we all have to do something just to set things in motion for the next to come. So it's a pretty cool place. It's growing rapidly, and
what are some of the challenges of running a startup out in Toronto that you run into?
It's how to scale fast.
Yeah.
There's definitely no short of talents, and everybody's innovating, but there's definitely a really difficult time for many, and I speak this representing the collective of is really being able to commercialize quickly and grow. And no matter what the milestones are, sometimes it's really hard to make a dent when you're competing with companies who have 100 million in funding, 50 million in funding. Those short, small little milestones, although a great win in the grand scheme of things, become hard to be able to stand out between the noise.
Are we pushing newer companies too hard to grow too fast?
We were talking about that. It's I think I'll tell you, when I started my first company in 2003, the word entrepreneur was never positioned. The word traction was never used. There was no metrics. And although at that time we called it rental software, which now became SaaS, there was no show me the hockey sticks. And that's why I get excited about what's happening now, because we really wanted to know the potential of the business model. We wanted to see what its longevity was, and it wasn't a buzz. It wasn't about give me the hockey sticks, let's overcapitalize, let's just... And now I think we're starting to see the shortcomings of pushing too hard.
Yeah.
You can inorganically build something that's well known, but I think building sustainability is one now that we're all sort of questioning how you can do that. And so I do agree with you. I think pushing is one thing, but encouraging the buying process through startups is something we need. A lot of times we get really great opportunities to work with tier one banks, but their procurement process limits us from being able to go through it for sheer amounts, because of time, amount of capital, amount of lawyers you need.
Right.
And that, I think, could use a little bit of hand-holding and encouragement to just try outside of the box.
Right. With some of those big enterprises, you just run into so many different divisions of the company that want to have a say in the business, and so it ends up being a hurdle. So how do you weed out those? I guess banks are one that that there's going to be a lot of regulation and issues, internal issues, and stakeholders that may become bottlenecks. How else do you identify what those opportunities that maybe you don't want to pursue are? Because of the time.
I think that's it. It's looking at what progress looks like. Sometimes progress is about acquiring 100 customers or getting through a hurdle like that so that you could learn from it and then build out a repeatable model. And that's really been my emphasis, where you say what's the mainstream and what are the sort of small little upcurrent jumps you can do. And part of that is when you do hit this challenge and you say, okay, this is wrong, rather than just ignoring it, looking for workarounds or looking for opportunities. And that's, it's a mutual outcome, where you're now asking banks to build out proof of concepts with you. You're working with their innovation labs. You're working with third parties to be able to introduce the flavor of what you're doing, because once they see the benefits, I think, we've all worked with large companies. There's no telling of what else, what they will do against the grain to get that. And that's what we've been really focusing on is how do we, fundamentally make things easy for us to be able to demonstrate value, and then from there take that as a sales challenge in our business model, rather than start with that and then work out the issues once we have 100 customers and we're meeting those challenges.
Right. Well, this might be a good opportunity to actually learn what Verve.AI is and what you guys do for other companies in the market.
Great. Yes, Verve.AI is augmented intelligence, and it's really around helping sales and marketing professionals find opportunities that are not necessarily visible to them in their customer experience. Forrester this year has talked about the benefits of being a customer-obsessed business, and we help the world's most customer-obsessed companies really take on what I was referring to earlier as the triage. From the customer journey all the way to finding new initiatives. The key thing is, how do we help companies transform from being customer aware or functional aware to customer led, and helping them move at customer speed of life. And so Verve.AI has really been in our core DNA to democratize data science. Someone like myself who built a lucrative career in being at that cross juncture of business and technology, I recognized the number of job offers I was getting. I realized there was a deficit out there, and when we started learning that analysis always happens at the tail end, and those micro moments within the customer journey that really take us from being good to great, we could actually tap into augmented intelligence, which is a machine learning logic platform. And some of our great use cases start in marketing and helping marketers become heroes again.
Yeah. Well, that was definitely something that resonated for me. And I think even now, hearing you talk about customer centricity, which is such a big topic these days, and it's really the way companies should be functioning, is really revolving everything around the customer. And I think that also goes back to, been talking a lot about design thinking, and really putting the customer at the center of process design, new product design. So yeah, it's very interesting that you guys really are at the center of that. And, as a marketer myself, knowing how valuable that information would be, in terms of helping me craft my messaging or getting to those stronger MQLs that I can pass on to my sales team.
And that, you bring up a really good point, like that trifecta is really around the right content, why now, within the right distribution channels. And if you think about that, for many people, we've thought it's about more or just tapping into exposure rather than making it conversational. And myself, the entire team, have really been at the forefront of sales and marketing automation. And so collectively, before the technology really expanded, was the use cases.
Right.
And this is really important when you evaluate technology, is it's not a couple of kids who just came out of Stanford who thought this would be the way to solve a marketer's problem. We really took the leaders and looked at what made them stand out. And when you look at that inherent ability to uncover blind spots and build competitive edge, it's really like taking that little dark space and just improving the logic.
Well, we hear a lot about social selling. Now the salesperson needs to be checking LinkedIn and checking Facebook and Twitter. What do you guys provide that person can't do on their own, that makes what you're offering so much more valuable than me just running a search before I call a prospect?
It's what you are doing now, being proactive versus reactive. And you probably hear me say this all the time, but our biggest mistake sometimes is we think our customers think about us as much as we think about them. And when you think about that, and as much as social selling is part of the mix, it essentially brings the question of, while you're spending your most precious resources in helping them write content about what it's like to have a baby and buy a house at the same time, you have a customer or a prospect who's buying a house and having a baby, and you're missing that window of opportunity.
Right. Yeah. That's a great
It's this notion
example.
that people will self-declare their intents. And living in a world where tech and cookies have really built a lot of our scoring and process, it's really about taking that functionality and applying personality in some ways so you can really put a face to your business.
Yeah, well, that kind of leads me into sort of the next question is this getting real Big Brother-ish, where people, like, now you can really actually identify me, where I've been, what I've been searching for, buying on Amazon. All of those different data points are now integrated to provide my profile to someone that's trying to sell to me. How do you feel about that?
Well, I always said no one ever complained when someone presented something that they wanted. It's always when you get solicited to something you don't want. And I personally feel it's the new old-fashioned way. And a great analogy I like to say is the old vacuum salesperson.
Right, okay.
They would do their research. They would know, in that household, is there a housewife? How many kids? What time does the husband go? So when he presents himself, he took that moment to really make sure he takes as little time as possible to find mutual affinity and mutual accountability. When it comes to privacy, I think a lot of it is the self-declaration, and I think people know that this is being gleaned on no matter what. The difference is, imagine someone does their homework. No one gets upset when you say, you've really taken the time to get to know who I am. versus you've taken the time to get a notification that I'm on your website.
Right.
You know, that abrasiveness is the difference, and that innate skill is actually what inspired a lot of our design, was meeting the old Xerox salespeople and looking at the index cards. Mm-hmm. You know, they'd all carry around a little box with those cue cards.
Right.
And, you know, what they would always emphasize wasn't necessarily where they've gone, but why.
Uh-huh.
And that's really what we're trying to democratize, is those who know the who, what, when, where, what, how, and most importantly, why, are able to really make it worthwhile for both parties. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it is about just hit spray and pray as
Yeah.
as someone.
Yeah, that's what
shared
we
with
say
me
in
once.
marketing. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, don't just spray and pray. Yeah, I mean, this is really delivering on the promise that we've had for some time about delivering on one-to-one marketing, which we've been talking about forever. And it sounds like you guys have actually cracked the nut and are actually helping marketers deliver on that promise.
Yeah. No,
But at the same time, you know, I then start to question as a marketer, how is this going to impact my own personal workload? How do I create all of these one-to-one messages at a level that's scalable? Yes, I want to close these deals, but am I going to have to balance, 575 different messages?
And that's it. I mean, that's where the last 10 years have enabled us to create automation. The challenge now is the pre and post.
Right.
And, if you get to look at Verve.AI, a lot of the profile and the criteria is what we refer to social DNA. Mm-hmm. And social DNA are attributes that can be used to segment and then use in an automation program. Mm-hmm. I think this notion around personalization at scale is a crawl, walk, run approach.
Okay.
And what we like to demonstrate in the first 30 days is the ability to create confidence that you're doing what you need to do to capture ROI or capture confidence, rather than, you need to add yet another process.
Right.
And take the talent out of the strategy. Mm-hmm. And, we're really enabling a business strategy with technology rather than a process with function, with a promise of the right customer, the right time.
Mm-hmm. You just said a mouthful. So I want to slow down and try to open that up a little bit, because it's one thing to sit here and look at each other and understand kind of what you're talking about, but it's another thing for the audience. So one of the things I do, I work on the opposite end of the spectrum. I work in qualitative data. I want to talk to people. I want to break their hearts open. I want to find the fourth answer below their standard answer, right? Because there's a richness in that. Both areas have their viability, but I measure oftentimes, and I just came up with this the other day, who are you listening to? Not what are you doing and how many times do you, but who are you listening to? So I know a lot of times with automated things, yes, you can mimic somebody's speech pattern, that kind of thing, based upon a lot of different criteria, but when that response comes back, you get back to Sandra's scalability problem, it seems like. So can you kind of give us an idea, how do you deal with an interaction between a very smart and learning AI and a person that doesn't want to isn't comfortable dealing with some kind of automated thing? Because I know you guys are working on these problems, but you kind of described it, but it's so big and it's hard to get hold of.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. We recently got involved with a financial services company that was investing a lot in content marketing and influencer marketing. They were ready to take it to the next level around different groups. What they started out doing was buying more tech that can automate the discovery of an influencer and execute. And what they found was they can't attribute. And so they could easily add 1, 2, 3, and the next thing you know, they had 100 things. And when the request came in, they were questioning what their next move is. And so what we did is we said, why don't you begin with Verve.AI to help evaluate if you've made the right decisions to date, and how do you spot opportunities that you can incrementally start adding. So really making all those prior investments in the influencer marketing look good. That really is an example where what we discovered was there was a tech. There was a couple of influencers that were getting a lot of impressions and click-throughs, and what they didn't do is they didn't know if they should just scale that or not. And by knowing the breadcrumbs around how their influence actually translated into brand value, which is really what we were able for them to trace, that's where they started the prioritization. So when you look at qualitative and quantitative, it's essentially starting out by saying, build out a framework and a strategy that automation and augmented intelligence can help, because you have the talent.
Right.
If someone just presented 3 key factoids that will allow you to enable step 1 to step 2, step 3, you wouldn't have to worry about the 500 different stages.
Right.
You would have the confidence to say, yep, this is taking me to a competitive era. This is, I know the voice of the customer, and this is actually enabling me to have a shared value or pursuit with my prospects and customers.
You've just given us a very good explanation about the quantitative versus the qualitative experience in using AI and smart machines. It freaks people out sometimes. There's a lot of more of that coming. And it's one thing to send out an automated response based on something, but it's a whole different thing to scale that. And then when the responses come back, when Pete purposely says, "Hi, robot," and I expect there to be a robot, that's not now you have something to deal with. I've hit the ball back to you guys. Are you listening? And then what's coming? How do we understand how to deal with that customer that's just popped back in and they're already in a little bit of a contentious mood?
This is the notion of what we start emphasizing around. Rather than efficiency, start looking at performance. So look at those micro moments that could take the path between respond back or digest or do something else. And that triage, as we were talking about before, part of the crawl, walk, run approach that we like to share is demonstrating the value, because in some ways it's new. The opportunity of working with the most customer-centric companies in the world, they already recognize they need something beyond parity. Mm-hmm. And so you had mentioned social selling and the functionality, and as they add more process, those who understand that their true competitive advantage is something unique are now recognizing that they have to look at the data in a different way. Mm-hmm. And so an example I like to share is the one with a large financial services company where they had invested in a lot of influencer marketing, and we're looking at the different paths of conversions and audience engagement. With Verve.AI, they were able to actually look at the real opportunities around the persona, were my impressions and clicks driving value to my brand. And by just looking at that model and using really what Verve.AI's intellectual property and capital is learning that the collection of data is one thing, but it's the analysis of it at speed of life that can get people from insight in motion. So
when you say speed of life, what do you mean by that?
Well, a good example is we're now in, Forrester likes to refer to this as the new age of customer, where in the age of information, it was really company that had the ability to control the conversation. And today, according to Forrester and even our philosophy is, our customers are informed and they live in an experience economy. Mm-hmm. If you really look at billion-dollar companies like the Snapchats and Facebook, what's the real product there? People. Mm-hmm. And so when you start realizing that motion and them looking, they're doing this at such a rapid pace.
Right.
The real implication to a bank, for example, is like now more than ever, they can switch, banks in 9 minutes.
Right.
So they really went from 9 years being able to manage the lifetime value of a customer to putting, having risk in their customer journey that 9 minutes could deter them from continuing.
Right.
And that speed of life is really the notion that if everyone is moving and they're informed, your analysis can't happen at the tail end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because we've become hyper-personalized. We can put ourselves out there. We can see our friends putting themselves out there. And my bank doesn't live in that world. But Facebook does. So Facebook, if they flip on the bank switch tomorrow, it's going to be a problem for anybody who's running a bank. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm already here all the time. Don't make me get out of my phone. And this is the simplest stuff. Swipe to my little icon for a Citibank and push the button. Not a sponsor, by the way. and then I have to do that experience. It could be literally Facebook, could be my bank.
Well, and that's a good point, because I'm a big fan of Facebook Messenger, and now that they allow brands to be a part of that, I see a lot of opportunity where, banks now can pick up from where they left off with their clients. And that's this idea, but let's not forget about trust. Because I'm a listening post to both startups and large banks, the one thing I always say, though, is be wary of just mobilizing where you think the fun is. There's a reason regulations were put in place. So as much as there's a lot of buzz out there, I think that the difference is just kind of going back to basics, taking that qualitative of how do you build trust and building your processes. So rather than doing more, you're building continuity.
If I'm going to push back. So, okay, let's say Facebook turns on its bank button. They're going to have to follow the rules.
But they do already have a payments functionality. I pay through Facebook.
Paying through it, but like actually putting your money in there where they're leveraging your money to invest. When I think of my bank, I don't have happy thoughts. When I'm told that this is my personal banker, like, oh, okay, cool. My first question in my mouth, what's my name? Personal banker. Like, it's contentious. Because don't lie to me. Don't tell me you're my personal banker. Like you're going to waste my time for an hour here while I sit here.
Exactly. Actually, that's a big example we talk about a lot with our strategy as a service, which is this notion of call to emotion. So where it was call to action, where someone just opened, a link, send them a product. And the one thing that I always say banks have an advantage on is they can count on their customers' banking. What they don't know is they don't have the voice of the customer. So one use case would be, and I shared this with my bank who I recently switched, and I'm as loyal as they come. And that's where I said I realize the deficit of customer centricity. But where it's like, imagine they actually said, hey, I noticed you opened a San Francisco office. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Using personal life moments that are evident because they know it. That, to your point earlier around privacy, is we typically expose this to people we work with and they never respond back.
Right.
Now imagine I said, congratulations on your move.
Right.
And you start wondering like, oh, I should have invited her to my housewarming party.
Yeah.
It goes to the same concept where people want to, they don't want to just move at speed of life with no trust and authentic, experiences, but we're making it so easy to see that anomaly. I think this is the only challenge I'm pushing out there is, yes, there's more, there's, all kinds of experiences, but can you translate the customer journey and what it really means and what moments there that make real conversion happen?
Right. And I've gone through exercises of defining the customer journey and also developing personas. And those are really guesstimates at best. It's not that you really understand that there is a linear journey from point A to B to C to purchase. It's what your assumptions are. And I think what you guys do is enable marketers to validate those assumptions and also the assumptions about persona. Because I say, okay, my customer is Susie B., 18-year-old cheerleader out of Benicia, but and she likes to watch The Bachelor or whatever. I don't know, like,
exactly. And even if you did, you're like, oh, how many out there are like, how many of my clients would share that same persona? Because it's the objective, and that's where we always say, like, human will always be involved, just like Facebook's bot. They actually take pride that 25% is human. And it's kind of going back to this thing where I hear a lot about people saying, oh, we've brought predictive tools and our buyer journey, and I see this little cycle, and from awareness to conversion to buy. And the one question I always say is, that person you're out there nurturing, are they the right customer? Kind of go back to asking the fundamental things, and the reason for that is we've traded in faces for just data at times, where the identity now of a customer does not really get translated until purchase.
Right.
And one example I like to say, I show this like a Facebook campaign, and I say, look, congratulations, FBID 00576 just liked your post.
Yeah.
Where's the face in that?
Yeah.
Right.
If you knew that was actually John and he's been your customer for 3 years, you'd know how to personalize, or better yet, how to push him in the right journey path.
Right. Ultimately, it's about developing relationships with your customers. When you become customer-centric, you are nurturing that relationship. You're getting to know that person. It's kind of like dating.
That's a perfect example. I always refer to as like, you either think you're going to walk in and just feed a bunch of lines and see who bites, or you can't muster the courage to say the right thing.
Right.
Or someone actually taps you on the shoulder and you're just like, what do I say? And if I say something, I'm going to blow it all. I think it's very similar, and just kind of tying it back to the customer, it's taking those silos and actually encouraging marketers to realize that can be connected. And, Salesforce's acquisition of Crux validates this hypothesis, because now the entire customer journey is in one cloud. So from media to purchase to customer support to marketing, when you say this person landed on your web page, you can actually expose yourself to what else have they experienced.
Right.
They just filled out a form and you've never met them. You take a very different approach if they've filled out a form and they've been your customer for 10 years.
Yeah. There's always these data-driven answers. They're quantitative-driven answers, and it always makes me wonder and push back a little bit, because I see it, but then there's always like, okay, well, there's the next ring. There's the next ring and the next ring. And in my world where I work and where I advise, it's ideal, like, focus on affect, not effect. And you just said this, right? So how does Facebook create this positive, evocative experience versus Citibank that creates this cold, generic one? And so you're saying that by aggregating this information, you can build trust. And we all say build trust. That's a do kind of verby kind of thing, but literally, like, what are the steps to building trust with it? Because I would venture this: you're not loyal to your bank. You just don't want the pain of changing. Like, you're more like, that's just too much of a hassle. So you don't think, man, I really love Rabobank. Like, that was my best.
Yeah, very rarely do people.
But ultimately, that's what a brand, an enterprise, a bank would want, is to have that affinity, build that affinity with their customers, because then those customers become lifelong customers.
And
if you really did love your bank.
If you did.
Do
you guys love your bank?
No.
I don't. I think I could.
Could. Yes, you could. I would love to have, if I had a personal banker, I wouldn't mind that person interacting with me maybe on Facebook, potentially. I mean, not everybody wants someone that much in their business, but...
Well, I talk about that frontline advantage, and I also, I refer to Starbucks and the old branch manager, where the branch had such a relationship that when someone would get a promotion, they would go in and tell his branch manager, and the branch would say, that's awesome. And a few days later, he would say, hey, I think I can save you some money, and I think I can protect you. But if you notice, that context is what drives the trigger of the upsell, so to speak.
Right.
It's not the online behavior. This person landed on this page. We don't know the other side of it.
Right.
Always feel guilty, because I was part of that marketing automation innovation as far back as 2005, and that was everything we would say is, hey, you need to score them. You need to, they're a way you can quantify and qualify who they are. But today, I think we can learn a lot more.
It's definitely more in context versus just an action on your website. I also had a marketing automation platform that was a nightmare to deal with, to the point, it was a very advanced installation, but very difficult to unravel after the fact and inheriting that platform. But it was to the point where someone would look at a particular image on the website, which would trigger an email. And then that email 3 years later was still going out with outdated information and impossible to uncover where the heck it was coming from. So I've felt this pain.
Yeah,
deeply.
No, and it's a wonderful thing. And that's actually why we always say we make all your prior investments look good first, because there's a beautiful thing with having that level of segmentation and, activation. But it's the trigger, and another really cool example, when someone is at New York Fashion Week, and now you can say, let's not send them that car email. Let's send them the email.
Right.
Let's assume you're a commerce platform.
Right.
Or you're going to South by Southwest or Dreamforce or what have you, and your marketers have already created a great communication program. But now you can eliminate and add people who've provided real intent and priority of it, rather than just kind of, let's just bundle everyone and hope to see who bites.
Right.
Because people now remember. And, that's this whole notion we're working with Forrester on, is like, we're in an experience economy, and you need to be customer-led. An example I was giving the other day was this whole promise that we're going to, right place, right customer, right time. Well, it's very similar, but now they're making the customer is your new CEO.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're determining if you are in the right place at the right time, and all we have to do is make sure we're prepared for that to happen. It could get really fun talking about this, and I think the biggest use case that I start with is like, what are you doing to really answer the business problems you are solving in your business, and if you can't answer that, then you focused on the data more than solving the business ROI or the business objective.
Right.
Like, what am I doing this for? Who are my best customers? What personas should we focus on?
Right.
What are those windows of opportunity that create value? That's how we like to start with our clients who know they need to do something new, but they're not sure which direction.
I keep feeling like you're describing our police forces here. They're so disengaged from the population. Who are their best customers? Not the guys that stay there in the jail, but there's such a disconnect there, and they could so desperately need a scalable way to interact better, because it's such a contentious relationship.
Just better insight into people and what they have going on. Maybe if they have a mental issue or not.
Right. Or any issue, or just if you come into two parties, don't instantly take a side and throw someone in jail, and do whatever. So there's a lot of potential for this, even on the public sector.
Yeah, well, that's something I once sat on a panel of around cognitive era in government, and not that I can say I'm an expert here, and I'm the last person who could be giving advice on policy making. But one thing is just how quickly can we uncover all sides of the coin?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like doing precedent search. And I know Watson is doing a really good job, IBM Watson, around helping lawyers look for precedents without the hours. It's always either speed or accuracy or context that is a barrier.
Right.
And so, I think being able to just say, hey, I didn't know about this. I wish I knew this before I did X. But government will be an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the extension to dating is probably good too.
Well,
just beyond the Google search, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to make it publicly available for self-service?
Yeah. So between us and the audience, if none of this works out, I know the go-to is dating, because it's like I hear all of my friends who've, even the other day I looked at the League, and I'm like, I'm amazed at how many single people all went to Harvard. I think there's more single people than people have ever attended Harvard. There's a problem here.
Yeah.
So it's also verifying.
Right.
Where it's like a lot of people don't realize that this person who's, the CEO of a company, does this exist?
I just need to know how to scale all my responses so I can have like the algorithm that's like, hey, baby. Or, whatever the appropriate one is. That's what I need.
For her, right? Yeah, it'd be custom.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Some women might like to be called
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
Honey
It's what
versus
questions to
sweetheart
ask.
Exactly.
versus
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yes,
That's what I exactly.
can you
Which-
tell I have a lot of male friends? But there's two sides. There's a guy I know who bought this app that basically automates the likes on
Wow.
Tinder, and
Oh my gosh.
literally, of course I won't name him, but he's like, well, I'll just wait to see who bites, and then I take it from there.
Right.
It's like taking the waterfall effect,
Right.
where there are those who actually go with the quality. So it's like performance or efficiency, where they're like, you know what, I'm actually going to find those who I'm most attracted to, and then find the common denominator. And their whole thing is, I'm going to ask the question first, where it's like, I love the fact that you just looks like you really like going to Bali. When was the last time you were there? Have you, because what people usually want to talk about themselves, where they don't like answering questions that are not built around their preferences. So
Yeah.
we can work on this,
Yeah.
One day we'll
And you have to balance the scale too, because I know as a guy that's used dating sites completely unsuccessfully, I put out a lot of information trying to talk to potential ladies, but get very little back, right? Nothing back. And then the women get the other end of it. They're like, I got a deluge. So there's a way to bring that more into.
Well, it's funny because they're also probably pitched a lot of promises.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And that I think is this perception issue that will change over time when people realize that, it's we're in a new phase where we want things. It's like, but, part of this is just actually start asking the why. Are you interested in this? Because I think that's the other thing is it's like goldfish mentality. We have 7 seconds before, something else gets our attention.
Right. Well, that's why the speed of life, to your point, is so important. Our speed of life has gotten so fast.
Yeah.
And I forget what was the stat? How many times we're checking our phone per day?
It's a lot.
I mean,
it's a lot.
I think it's it's definitely over 100.
Yeah, well, I think
could be
now
some
it's
people
about
1,000.
2 hours and 5 minutes, 10 minutes is actually just direct to like only mobile search,
Right.
or only mobile discovery, and that
We've turned ourselves into goldfish.
actually that is true. There was a stat, and I remember reading where we used to have 27-second attention spans, and I think now we're 12.
Wow.
And I think a goldfish is like 8 or 9 or something.
Oh my gosh.
That's why I always refer to it where, that's where influencer marketing, I think, is going to have a difference, because people will want to carry on, like they'll say, oh, great, but if you don't have the next move and the next move. But that's where it's better just asking them what they want. And I mean, that's what we always start by saying, get to know your clients first, because it's probably so much easier to build that relationship, taking a bit of the old and applying it with the new.
Yeah, definitely. So we're here at AI World, and you're actually slotted to speak. What are you going to be speaking about?
This is a great conversation. It's about brand relevance using augmented intelligence. And I'm happy because when we were at IBM Watson World, they introduced this concept of augmented intelligence, really showing this, how do you take these multiple decision points, but manage a currency that will drive your best value, which is customer affinity and relevance. You said it earlier. You said the fact that, when someone becomes a real happy customer, they become your most authentic marketers.
Right.
And that
when
in
they
itself,
love you, yes.
And
And
that
then
in
they
itself-
tell their friends and family how much they love you. That's the best kind of
and
marketing.
it didn't cost you
Exactly.
anything. And that when in a day where we still are asking what 50% of our marketing budget is being used, and we keep getting more cuts, it's like, why don't you try to figure that authentic word of mouth? And so we're going to talk about interesting studies we've done with great companies who volunteered.
Very cool.
And look at how, when you apply confidence versus sort of different trial and error, over time, what those results look like. And so it'll be, I hope to be an engaging conversation, and I want people to respond to it. My biggest objective here is, getting the audience and everyone who's interested in AI to just start realizing, like, what is it that we're doing? You know, there's a horizontal group, but what are those vertical use cases that will transform our business models and how we build relationships?
I like it. I like relationships. That's the best.
You're a relationship guy.
I am.
Yeah, we got to get you. We'll create a project for you just to look at different dating
So you can maximize your messages.
opportunity spotting.
I have a girlfriend.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
Said
perfect.
that on air.
Big news. Big reveal.
Oh,
Yep, I have
Well,
a
that's even
girlfriend.
better.
I know, right?
We can do it for everyone else.
Yes, we can.
well, I think that this has been a really great conversation. I guess my next question, maybe the last question, would be, what's the future for Verve.AI? What's next?
Well, we're really excited to start announcing certain relationships with large media companies, and I think this is really where we're going to start just easily demonstrating what augmented intelligence does to making marketers and salespeople really understand the customer experience and customer journey. So that's really where we're going, and we're constantly looking for great talent as always. So that, I know, is the next move, and yeah. So we started thinking about something else, but yeah, we're just excited to be here and grow and earn our customers' trust one at a time.
Yeah.
I love
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dalia. It's been a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on your panels the next few days here at this conference, which is really cool.
No, thank you for giving me your time. It was great.
it. Yeah, you did fantastic. I love it when you talk about trust and affect and all. You're speaking my language. I love that.